Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Ishvaro Guratmeti Murti Veda Vibhagine Vyomabda Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Sarva Vedanta Sedanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanandam Satguru Pranatoshmaham Om Shanti 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 Om.
Arlindo, I wanted to ask a question I've been wanting to ask, and I never find the right time, so if I can just ask real quick.
Please, yeah, this is our Q&A as well.
I've always wondered, is Krishna like the version, the version in Christianity as Jesus? Kind of the same or not?
What a question, huh? How can I answer that? Yeah. So I'm not an expert to really ask that question, because I can talk about the teachings that comes through Lord Krishna to humanity, and the humanity is being represented by Arjuna, and Lord Krishna is representing Ishvara. So within that context, I do talk about Lord Krishna as a teacher, as a guru, and he has this complete body of knowledge in regards to the Dharma nature of the field, and how to live in harmony, and the relationship between actions and its results, and the relationship between the doer and the Shwara. So he teaches everything, but he also teaches Satya Mitya. He tells the true nature. The teachings of the Gita are wonderful and beautiful, and I wish we have a Sangha to unfold the entire Gita, because I love that teaching, and now I will be able to unfold it better, than I did in Portuguese language a few years back. So now, how does Krishna compare with Jesus? So I don't know, maybe Lynn or Mark or Claude can help me to answer that.
Hi, I was thinking in both cases, they are Ishwara's vehicles for presenting knowledge. And they come out of different they're conceptual indeed, because they are vyavaharika and not real. But I think they're just vehicles for knowledge. In that case, I think they're both similar.
Yeah.
But different culturally.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what others think.
That makes sense, yeah.
Anything from Mark and Claudio?
That was a beautiful answer, Lynn. I really appreciate that answer. They say that Krishna is an avatar. So Krishna is actually an incarnation of God in the form, even though he's got a body. So that is God incarnate. And apparently the avatars come down to this loka when they're needed on Earth. So obviously at that time he was needed. With regards to Jesus, I think Jesus was a Jnani who knew who he was, basically, but probably not an avatar. However, these are all just concepts, really. So like Lynn said, they were both great teachers and had the knowledge.
Mhm.
Yeah, for me it's also the same. I also ask me this kind of question sometimes, and I find it interesting to see what's not similar in other religions. Even if Arlindo sometimes tells us that we don't have to make too much this, but my mind, I have a vasana for this, so sometimes I enjoy thinking about that, and I think a lot about this, of the, maybe even I asked you this question, I think 2 years ago, more or less, or maybe it was a little bit different, but yeah, I think it's more or less, it represents more or less the same, yeah, the same, how you say, the symbolic, how Lynn just said, symbolically represent the same avatar, the same knowledge, the same, yeah, how did Lynn say that? A means of knowledge. He said, okay, I don't remember the word, but okay, yeah, it's a means to convey knowledge
Yeah.
to the people, and I think it's more or less the same. Also, the name is very similar. Krishna, Cristo, so Christ.
Yeah.
So it's, I think
Yeah.
represent
Oh,
the same
that's
thing.
true. I never thought of it. Yeah. Nice.
But then
Yeah.
there's a difference, because if you look at the knowledge itself, both figures can be looked at in terms of a religious context. But then Vedanta is something different.
Totally.
It transcends the religious context. So, and I don't know enough about the deep metaphysics of Christianity to say whether that's available there. I hadn't found it in my experience.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Lynn.
they're different.
I was about to add that to the conversation as well, because we hear, for example, that Krishna and Ram, they were two avatars, no? And but this is within the context of the Vedic culture. We say those are the most famous avatars, and I never really was interested to find out who were the other avatars or not. I find all of that irrelevant, you know. The James often says that avatar, or the concept avatar, is the one who does not fall into this density of the soul, you know, soul expression, does not fall by the weight of karma, you know, it descends. There is a deliberate will to descend to help humanity. So it's a beautiful concept. But ultimately, if we have a great Mahatma, let's say, you know, Ramana Maharaj is a good example, whether he's an avatar or if he was born on account of his karma, it is irrelevant. What is relevant is the positive impact he had on humanity, you know. So that's why James sometimes says that an avatar and Yanni is about the same thing, because they can help, you know, in some ways. And I was going to say as well that although avatar or no avatar, like in the context of what Marx said, but Christ, you know, Jesus or Christ, it's something within our culture, you know, Christian culture. So we have a little bit more of a connection with it, and there are a lot of people in Vedanta that still have that strong bond with the Christian culture, you know, and therefore there is this thing of trying to compare or trying to harmonize these both figures, which are conceptual ultimately, you know, although they could have existed, or they are just symbols of the Sampradaya. But when we look into the teachings of Sampradaya, it is, you cannot deny the fact that the teachings of Lord Krishna, they are profound and complete. the teachings presented by Christianity, I mean, because there we see the Sampradaya of Vedanta, the Vedic culture present the teachings of Lord Krishna that can be interpreted on different angles, from the yoga angle or from the Vedantic angle, but there is a lot to it, whereas the teachings presented by the Christian Sampradaya through the priests or through these places, monasteries and places where they formed those priests and so on, I never really looked very deeply into those. Like Lynn said that she looked, but she did not find the same profundity, But my impression is that it's more like a religious structure that helps people to live within the borders of Dharma, let's say, So just to keep the humanity from killing one another, or invading one another, taking, So those are the values of all religions, even if it's a rudimentary religion, they say, in the sense that says, don't do this and this and this, otherwise you will burn in hell. It is a kind of very rudimentary teaching, rather than having a full explanation of Dharma as a law, a universal law that needs to be in balance, in harmony, so that every living creature can live well, in harmony. So there are teachings, and most of these religions, they present behavioral codes, and even Buddhism is not much more than a religion, because although it has rejected or removed the concept of God, creator, but it's mostly based on behavior and good actions and meditation and trying to, I don't know. I mean, I talk with some friends who have went through this experience with Buddhism for decades, and they tell people from Vedanta, and Stan being one of them, he used to tell me his experience, whenever I talk to him, and it's my impression that they reject the Vedas, the scriptures, and God altogether. But yet they somehow seem to help society to stay to keep them from going wild, because there is so much wildness due to total ignorance. So it's better we have some spiritual knowledge, even if it's based on code of behavior, because, under whatsoever circumstance, even if you say, no, you're going to burn in hell, or you're going to have a place in paradise. So it's okay. It's better than nothing. It's better than having people living a wild life driven by desires and aversions, to the extent of not following any rules, So that's what I want to say. And it's more or less what Lynn was saying, which is also important for us to understand. Anything else, Karen?
Yeah, I mean, I see that it's both both of the figures are symbolic. Yeah. I love the way Vedanta focus, there's a lot of focus on your mind, the jiva, and his mind, and controlling that, training that,
We have to remember. Remember that all these Vedic figures of gods, it is a human projection, of course, okay? Because humans they have a huge value for security, and they want the hopes and desires to be met. So therefore, they have this relationship with the creator that they project according to the nature of their desires, and then they project these different, entities. So some is for wealth, some is for health, some is for security. They have all these different deities that represents basically the human nature in their desire and fears. And then a group of desires of people, is going to project a certain God that could help us to achieve, those desires. So ultimately, it's a projection of human beings. Now, whether Christ really exists as we learned. Lately I have been learned that most that we learned is not really true, not necessarily true. There is so much time, and people change and manipulate according to their interests. But even if they existed, whether they exist or not, we don't know. And if they both exist literally, so the story we hear about them now, it's not much relevant. What is relevant is the teaching, and the teaching that comes through Lord Krishna in the Gita is pure Vedanta, pure Upanishads, and in association with Karma Yoga and Dharma Yoga. So that's what counts. Right, Karen?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
You are most welcome.
Good discussion. Good discussion. Thanks.
Because we like to have an expression. We like to live expressing gratitude for the Creator, and we need to use a symbol. Yeah. We can say, no, I'm a Jnani, so I don't need symbols anymore. I'm going to worship myself because I am Brahman, the substratum. So I don't need any of these deities, But it seems to be more juicy to worship in duality, a symbol of Ishvara, So I sometimes say that Ishvara is one, and then all these deities, they are sales representative of Ishvara. But it's not that they are selling anything. People are creating them and wanting to buy things, in exchange to a certain rituals or behavior. So it's more or less how I see it. There is only one creator, and it's nice to have a relationship in duality with a symbol of this creator. We know it's pure sattva, pure intelligence, but yet we can project that on a symbol so that we can have fun. Because life is what? Life is to experience duality. Why not just throw a symbol of the creator? And then in duality, you still do your prayers or puja. The Vedantic prayer is one and the same. Thank you, Lord, And if anything, give me strength to deal with my parabodha karma, howsoever it comes. So what else we're going to say? Except thank you and give me the strength, give him the purity, the clarity, and so on. And we understand the Ishvara is not a big jiva, but it is the system, the intelligent, perfect system, pure knowledge. Okay, we begin today from the verse number 6. The word number 6 says, the intellect thoughts appears to be conscious on account of the reflection. Just a moment. 6:05 we begin today. I got confused here.
I think it's okay. I think we saw the 5 last time, I think.
Yeah, we stopped here and then we begin on the 6. Yeah, but there is a little summary because Swami Paramarthananda often does a little summary, especially when the teaching begins on the following week. He gives a little bit. I'm going to just pass by. In the first 5 verses, as we know, since we stopped for 1 week, the author talks about the individual who consists of 3 factors in the form of 3 seers. So just to do a recap, so we have the seer, the absolute seer, and 2 relative seers. So the absolute seer, we know, is our true nature, conscious existence, and then this consciousness, because on this analysis, we have to look at the Brahman from the angle of consciousness, okay? Then we have pure limitless consciousness that somehow is going to illumine, to illumine the second seer. The second seer is present to be the mind, and then the mind, we know that it has parts, and it's going to be more analyzed that from the verse 6 on. So it's very interesting how it gets formed and how it transfers this light of consciousness, And then we have these 3 parts. Normally the individual is present as one with 3 bodies and 5 sheets, but here the author introduced the individual as a composite entity consists of 3 seers or 3 illuminers. Each one of them is a seer or a illuminer on its own, but one is absolute, the others are relative. So each seer has got a corresponding seen object, as we know. Absolute consciousness, the absolute seer, is going to have one scene to illumine. And the scene to illumine, as we know, is the subtle body. The subtle body can also be said to be the mind with its functions. So now we have consciousness, which is the seer, is the absolute seer, and then it sees, it sees the subtle body, and somehow it illumines the subtle body, producing those aspects of our human experience, our sentience. So we will look more into it. But we have the absolute seer, which is going to see or illumine the subtle body. The subtle body is going to transfer that seenness, let's say, that vision or that light, and then it's going to illumine, and then the sense organs are going to become the seer. So we have these 3 levels, and we can also extend that to the physical body with the physical instruments of interaction that are illumined and animated by the sense organ. So we saw that each one of these seers has a corresponding scene, and it's going to be transferring this light of consciousness. We have 3 pairs of seer-seen, or we can extend to 4 if we consider the sense instruments as seen by the sense organ or illumined by the sense organ. Okay, I don't want to extend too much these recaps because we are advanced students of Vedanta. So thereafter, the author is defined the nature of this absolute seer. So in the verse 5, we're going to begin looking into the very nature of the absolute seer. Okay, before we see more how this gets transferred and the relationship between the absolute seer and the relative seers and so on. Now we have the absolute seer, and it is free, limitless consciousness. This consciousness, as we know, does not have a beginning, neither an end. It's eternal, meaning to say it's beyond time and beyond space. And not only it's beyond time and beyond space, because time and space is something that is illumined and revealed by this free, limitless consciousness, but it is also self-shining, and there goes the word free and independent, meaning to say it does not depend on other factor that's going to transfer consciousness, so that consciousness is no longer free, independent, and then transfer to other. No, consciousness is free and independent. It's not only self-shining. It is self-shining. It illumines all the other things without requiring any instrument for illumination. For example, the mind can illumine the sense organs, but in order for the mind to illumine the sense organs, it needs what? It needs one instrument. The instrument is the eye thought, okay, which is the subtle aspect of the mind, which is the intellect I like to present it, the subtle intellect, okay, the observer. So the mind is going to transfer or illumine the sense organs, but it needs an eye thought, okay? And then it's going to illumine not only the instruments, but it's going to illumine the mind itself, because the mind is composed by emotions, thoughts, you know, and the sense of doership as well. So the intellect has that power. That's why sometimes I split this Drg in two, Drg Drsya, and actually in five pairs, okay? So, but let's keep the structure here. But the distinction here is that although the mind and then later on the sense organs, the mind is going to illumine the sense organs through a thought. The sense organs are going to illumine the sense instruments through what? Through the sense organs themselves, okay? So every one of these relative illuminers, yeah, or illuminators, it requires an instrument to transfer that seer, that sentience, or that, you know, illumination. But consciousness does not need any instrument. It just shines on its own, and then anything that it pervades, it's going to receive its all-pervading consciousness. Consciousness is going to pervade, and as we know, consciousness has a very intimate relationship with subtle bodies. And then wherever there is subtle bodies, it somehow pervades it, and then it shines and infusing the subtle body with intelligence, and then the eye thought is going to transfer its light to the thoughts itself, to the sense organs, and so on. And then everything is going to give us an impression, including the physical body, as true source of sentience, you know, of illumination. Even the physical instrument appear to be the seers. Now my eyes are the seer. Why? I close my eyes and then I no longer see. So even our physicality, our physical instruments, our perception, and they appear to be the seers, but we know that's not that way. Drg Drsya comes to help us to see our human experience divided by these different levels, which is quite unique, different from the five koshas and the three bodies and the three states. So the mind requires an instrument, but consciousness does not require sense organs to illuminate any object. And the mind, so it just shines on its own, and then whatsoever is there. But can consciousness illumine the physical instruments by the way, you know, the physical body? No, it requires the subtle body, as we know. It must transfer its light, you know, to the seer, which is the mind or the intellect. So it has to transfer it, and then the intellect transfers to the instruments with sense organs, and the sense organ transfer to the physical body. So the mind, consciousness, although it pervades everything, it requires certain vehicles to illumine the world out there, okay? But it does not require any instrument to illumine the subtle body, okay? It's going to illumine the subtle body, it's going to vivify the subtle body, and subtle body, being a servant of consciousness, is going to transfer that light of consciousness. And then when it says here that the mind does not require, the consciousness does not require an instrument, meaning to say it does not require an instrument to illumine the intellect, you understand? It's just by itself, without any instrument, it reflects on the human subtle body, on the human intellect. And then the aham, the I am, I exist, it manifests itself without any instrument. And then, of course, the intellect needs to use the I thought as a means, an instrument to illumine the other thoughts and to illumine the sense organs, which is going to need other instruments to illumine the physical body. Does that make any sense? Are we on the same page? This is to mean that this illumination that happens, it does not happen in time or in space, and it's not an action in time. The mind becomes alive in the mere presence of consciousness. Consciousness illumines, not by will, desire, plan, or action. Shakti just is, and in its presence, the mind becomes alive and sentient. So it does not have any desire. It's just the nature of consciousness is to illumine and reveal. So if it is someone's nature, okay, it means there is no desire or deliberate action involved, okay? That's why the word consciousness shines. Is a good one, but it may give the impression that it's doing an action of shining, or consciousness reflects, So all those words, somehow they present some problems, So, but the fact is that it does so without any action on its own. It's its nature to pervade everything in the universe, and it shines and vivifies everything. Everything becomes alive in the presence of this consciousness, which is the only source of life. Everything becomes alive and sentient. That's figuratively called as Sakshi, illumining. Thus, Sakshi does not undergo any modification also by illumining. So as it shines on different subtle bodies, this Shakti, Chaitanya, does not go through any modification, as we know, although the mind is going to appear different every time it comes out, let's say, of sleep state, so deep sleep. So the mind is going to be undergoing a different state, because the mind is a configuration of the 5 sat elements with a lot of sattva. The sattvic aspect of all the 5 elements are going to, to form the intellect. And then the reflection is going to be a bit different, but consciousness does not undergo any modification as it shines or illumines, okay? This is a concept that we understand very well, because we can put it to test to the degree that we can discriminate consciousness from our own mind. And then we can observe and see that the mind changed, but I do not change. And I mean that not only based on every teaching that we have started, following the logic supporting this statement, but we can notice it on our very life experience, human experience. We know that there is something that is always there, not changing, whereas the mind is mental state is changing. You get that, Karen? Of course, it's a subtle discrimination, but it's important that we understand the difference, because the consciousness does not go through any modification. And whereas the mind will, without undergoing change or having any will or desire, Sakshi, by its mere presence, becomes the seer of the mind without requiring any instrument, okay? Shall we move on to the verse 6? The intellect, thoughts, appears to be conscious on account of the reflection of consciousness present in it. The intellect, thoughts, is of two kinds. One is the ego, and the other is the inner instrument, mind, intellect, and memory. This is quite a verse. We're gonna need to do some work here because there is a lot of room for confusion, and maybe you can help me as well. Because it begins by saying that intellect, it's equating intellect as thoughts, appears to be conscious on account of the reflection of consciousness present in it. Okay, so we have consciousness, and then conscious is going to reflect on the subtle body, and then it's going to show up as the intellect. But here it says the intellect, thoughts, appear to be conscious on account of the reflected consciousness. The consciousness is going to reflect in the subtle body, is going to produce what? It's going to produce the I am, aham. The aham is, is the primordial thought, okay? And then we have this thought. This thought is the instrument that's going to allow consciousness to transfer sentience to the sense organ. Not only is going to allow consciousness to transfer this sentience to the other thoughts, because we have one thought which is aham, and as we know, aham is going to face itself and with a world of objects, and then immediately idam, which is this, that, and everything that's in there, is going to relate to this aham. So now we have consciousness, and then we have this aham thought, which is the intellect. The intellect appears to be conscious. It owns its consciousness to consciousness itself. But here it says that of consciousness present in it. The intellect thoughts is of two kinds. Now we have the aham thought, the intellect, okay, is of two kinds. One is the ego, and the other is the inner instrument, mind, intellect, and memory. And then it throws intellect inside there again, It says that one is the ego. Before it says the intellect thoughts, the intellect, meaning to say the mind, is of two kinds. One is the ego, and the other is the inner instrument, mind, intellect, and memory. So I found it a bit confusing, and as the Swami P goes about unfolding it, there is room for things that are not very, very clear, and I will translate according to my understanding of this, okay? So it says here that the intellect with thoughts is of two kinds. One is the ego, and the other is the inner instrument. The inner instrument, okay, I would say there are two thoughts, two kinds. One is aham, okay, and the other is the objects, idam, the things that come under the light of aham, the aham thought. The aham thought can have a thought relate to memory, a thought relate to the sense of doership, and a thought relate to the object that are showing up. The objects show up from outside, from the field, and also from the causal body. So all of these are idams in relationship to aham. So one is the intellect, which is the ahamkara, the I am thought, and the other is the inner instrument, which I would say the mental aspect, okay, of our human experience. We know that there are emotions, and the emotion, they come attached with every idam thought. Any idam vrit comes with a sense, a sensation, more or less on those lines that I like it, or I don't like, or not so, or indifferent. So we have this sensation, these emotions that come with the thought, because every thought, which is not different from the object, every object is not different from the thought about the object, and then these thoughts are going to come with another aspect, which is with feelings and emotions, and then they are going to go into our files and to become memories about our course of experience. And then we have one aham and a bunch of thoughts which all relate to to idam, which are objects, and even the inner instrument, like my memory. Our memory is a secondary thought in relation to aham, because we have to be there, try to recall our memories. So I need to, to make a decision here. I better remember how it was in the past when I found myself with similar situation. So I would look at this as one is the aham, the other are the thoughts, the inner thought. The thoughts relate to the inner instrument, okay? Memory, feelings, and vrittis about the objects, okay? So let's see how Swami P unfolds this verse. With the previous verse, the author, from the 6th verse up to the 12th, the author talks about the mechanism behind the arrival of these seers. So now he's going to look carefully on the mind as with all its functions, and how the dynamics of transfer, of this seer consciousness to the mind, and how mind does transfer to the lower realms, even of lowest realms. We see the mind itself, like the secondary thoughts and the sense organ. So, and how they are formed as well. How do these three seers originate? What are their functions? What are the roles? And what are their activities? The activities of these three seers make up a life of an individual. So with Drg Drsya, we understand that the individual is a sum total of the absolute seer or illuminator, and then the others as well. When we pack it all together, and then we say, this is what I am, okay? I am these three or four or five, aspects of light, being sentience, being transferred, and so on. The activities of these three seers make up a life of an individual. The author talks about the formation and functions, and so on. The mind, the third one, Shakti, is never formed in time. So it's going to explain how this transfer and how these other seers are going to be formed. And here it makes a point that the absolute seer, the absolute illuminator, was never formed in time. This consciousness, Sakshi Chaitanya, is always present, and it always illumines the mind. And it was never born, it was never formed. It's not made of parts or memories or anything. It's the very substratum of the universe, and it exists beyond the appearance or no appearance of the universe, as we know. The illumining function is not an action time. It's always there. It's the nature. Sakshi Chaitanya illumines whatsoever around, and if there is nothing, it illumines nothingness also. So we tend to say that on a different language, we say, in the absence of any phenomenal object to be illumined, it illumines itself. Okay, we can say illumines the absence of object, meaning to say illumines space or illumines nothingness or emptiness. But we can say on a more positive language, we can say it illumines itself, because the sun, it's either illumines something that comes in contact with its light rays, or it illumines nothing, or illumines itself, because it's self-illumined. We say that it illumines itself so that we understand the Purna nature of Sakshi Chaitanya. It's full, it's not empty, it's not nothingness. It's the fullness of this light of the illuminator that illumines itself. Therefore, anything that comes in contact gets illumined, because, you better do not come in contact with reality, or you get illumined by reality. So it's your fault, all objects in the universe. The act author takes up the seer two, the mind. We're going to look into the mind, the seer two. This has to be discussed because the mind by itself can never become the seer of anything because the mind is made out of matter and so inert by nature. Now we're going to even another aspect of what we call mind, okay? Which in the Panchadas is nicely described as the substantial nature of the subtle body, the substantial nature of mind. The substantial nature of mind is a subtle matter. It's inert, subtle matter, okay? We know that the subtle body is made out of the 5 subtle aspects of the elements. We have the 5 elements. The sattvic aspect of the elements is going to make what we call the substantial aspect of our minds. Okay, the subtle body is inert matter. It's made out of the 5 subtle and sattvic elements of the 5 elements. And then we pull all these 5 elements, but only the sattvic aspect of them, because they are all made out of the 3 energies, as we know, in the causal body. But then we pull them only the sattvic aspect, and then we have this subtle composition or configuration called the subtle body. So it is inert, subtle matter, okay? Therefore, the substantial nature of our mind, it can never illumine anything. It requires the light of Sakshi Chaitanya because it is inert by nature. So the point to be made here is like, what is inert cannot have light on its own, cannot have sentience on its own. It must receive sentience or borrow sentience, from a principle that is self-sentient, self-luminous, self-conscious, okay? So consciousness being the only source, it somehow lends, without any interest, sentience or consciousness to the mind. But the mind being substantial by nature, it's just a mirror-like, as we know. It is an apparatus that somehow reflects the Sakshi Chaitanya. The mind is made out of sattva guna, of the 5 elements. It's inert, subtle, invisible matter. It's invisible substance. It's energy. Matter, being inert, cannot experience anything. So how does the mind become a seer? A good example here is the moon. As we know, the moon becomes illumined, and not only illumined, but it becomes the illuminator of some other celestial bodies, being our planet one of them. Within certain conditions, the moon is going to reflect the light which seems to be coming from itself. But as we know, it's consciousness. The light of the sun is going to somehow hit the surface of the moon. And the surface of the moon is going to work as a reflector. And then it's going to transfer this light. It is a little bit of a mild, not very powerful and strong, but the nature is the same. The nature is light, sunlight. Sunlight reflects in a poor reflector. It's a poor reflector, okay? But yet it is a reflector, and we can enjoy some of that light that originally comes from the sun, as we know. So how does the moon illumine? We know the moon borrows the light and the reflection. When a reflection is formed, the moon gets illumined. And then it becomes illuminated. The author says that the same phenomenon takes place in regard to the mind. Sakshi Chaitanya, original consciousness, can be compared to the sun in analogy, and the mind can be compared to the moon. This is the analogy. Sakshi Chaitanya is formed on the moon, or it's formed on the mind, and it's then called Shaya pravesa, okay? Shaya means the pratibimba Chaitanya. So a Shaya pravesa is the pratibimba, is the reflected Chaitanya. Pratibimba. Bimba, a consciousness, original, I think. Pratibimba is reflected consciousness. Shaya means the pratibimba Chaitanya, or is formed on the mind. So this reflected consciousness is formed in the mind. And what happens when this reflection is formed in the mind? We have what? We have the ahamkara, we have the aham, I am. I am, I exist, okay? That is the reflection of Sakshi Chaitanya. When it hits this subtle platform, the subtle medium, and then produce a nice reflection. And of course, if the reflector is nicely, extremely sattvic, the reflection is going to be more faithful to the nature of Sakshi Chaitanya, okay? Not only faithful to the nature of Sakshi Chaitanya, but this reflection is unavoidably is going to get some of the attributes of the reflecting medium. That's why we say that the reflecting medium needs to develop more sattva, sattva guna, so that the nature of the Sakshi Chaitanya can be known and experienced even by the Jivatma, as something that is very close to its original free, limitless consciousness. So the medium is important as well. The moment the reflected consciousness is formed, two things happen, okay? The first thing is the mind becomes known. So now, who is going to know this ahamkara is the big question here. When the moment this aham comes in the morning, there is something about ourselves that immediately say, oh, you, not again. So let me sleep. Let me have some peace here. So there is something about us that become aware that the guy came back. Oh, ahamkara is here. And then with aham, idam is going to show up. And then my trouble begins, my day begins. So the moment the reflect consciousness is formed, two things happen. This mind is ahamkara becomes known, experience, and it shines. So ahamkara, this first aspect of the mind is the most intriguing because it immediately shines and he shows up as the real illuminator, the real source of consciousness, the knower, the experiencer, the illuminator. It shows up, but at the same time, it is seen by something else, okay? And this something else is what we are. And we know that we see this thing happen every day in the morning, you understand? And although consciousness is not an experienced entity, we know when this ahamkara comes, which is the I thought, okay? So for didactic, to make it didactically coherent, I tend to say that ahamkara is the intellect, and the ego and its emotions, is the mind, and the intellect having a higher view, because it's up there, it's the reflection of consciousness, and it's subtler than the mind and the thoughts and the ego. It managed to objectify, okay? So we could say that aham is the pure intellect or the subtle intellect that once it develops certain qualities, it may understand and even perceives that I know this, this mind, I know these thoughts, feelings, emotions, and the ego, everything is known to me. But yet we would say, okay, is there something else illuminating this intellect, this ahamkara? This not the ahamkara, the aham, aham bridge. Yes, it's consciousness. Can consciousness experience literally the aham? The aham. Well, yes and no. You understand? Cognitively, we have a sense of experience, but the scripture says, and we need to agree with it, that consciousness is not an experiencing entity. Remains the question here. So what is there experiencing the aham thought when aham thought comes? Is it consciousness, or it's the aham thought, aham reach itself, experience itself? You understand? Yes, Lynn.
Yeah, it's interesting because in some of the scriptures, I can't remember which one, but it lumped the ahamkara in the intellect, as you seem to have alluded to just now. Would I be right in thinking that the aham is the very fundamental first upadi in the jiva, the most subtle upadi?
Yeah, we can say that the causal body is the first upadi, but it is unconscious. So as far as the jiva atma, the intellect, is a good description of the most primordial and relevant upadi.
Primordial, that's a word, yeah.
In the end, it is the intellect that has to be given up as real, which in the old days I used to present as the subtle intellect, as the subtle observer. Okay, that which observes, what's below its domain, let's say, So it is because when we go, it was before we're done. When we go into deep meditation, there is something that's there as the subtle witnessing or observer or meditator, that is observing all kinds of phenomena. Some of them are very subtle, such as breaches and feelings, and so there is this aham there as the most subtle aspect, and it's I think it's a good way to see it as the subtle intellect, the intellect that is subtle enough to understand its distinction from the thoughts, feelings, emotions, memories, and including the thought feeling, I am the doer, and so on, So otherwise we wouldn't have this possibility, this ability to refine the intellect to become an observer of the inner instrument. We know that the inner instrument, somehow they become objects to a certain aspect of our human experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Let me see where I am. Not only does the mind get illumined, but the moment also it immediately becomes the seer number 2, let's say, or the illuminator of what? Of the sense organs, let's say, within this context, but we know that this mind, this intellect, immediately it illumines and becomes the seer of the inner instrument, which includes the sense organs as well. Sense organs, they are just instruments, so they are invisible and less tangible, let's say, than our thoughts and emotions, and of the other organs. Although the sense organs, they are there, between the subtle body and the physical body. They are instruments that we get confused about. Okay, so how is my vision today? Okay, well, my vision is now well because I'm not having focus. So, and then I have a certain view of my instruments, my sense organs. Okay, but a lot of the time we will say, so am I having some problem of vision due to my sense organs or my sense instrument of vision, So it is objectifiable, the sense organ. And in this context, we need to understand that the intellect, the mind is going to transfer its sentience, which is which is received from Sakshi Chaitanya, we transfer it to the sense organs, okay? And also we could say that we transfer it to the other vrittis, okay? Because we need this aham vrit, and then this aham vrit gives life to the other vrits, and the other vrits are going to be related to the sense organs because they are all formed through these 5 sense organs. It's all interconnected, you know? This is how the mind becomes the seer too, because of the formation of the reflected consciousness in the mind, reflected consciousness in the mind. The mind becomes sentient as thought. It has its own light or sentience, or as thought it has. The mind becomes, and then it somehow it falls into the delusion that it has sentience of its own. It is a great delusion, as we know. We find it everywhere because everybody is deluded by Maya. No? The mind appears to be naturally sentient, but we have to know that the mind does not have its own sentience because it's made out of matter. Okay, now again, so what is the mind? The mind is the subtle body in its substantial, is made out of matter, but then there is something that somehow reflects in this substantial nature of the mind, okay? And then this aham, which is the intellect, it is a mixture of the substantial aspect of the mind and the sentient aspect of the mind, okay? The mind in its substantial nature is subtle matter, but the aham vritti, okay, this aham and the other inner instrument, they are illumined by original consciousness, and they are not really the substantial aspect of the mind only. Is the substantial aspect of the mind plus the thought aspect of the mind, or the sentience of the mind, or the reflection that occurs in that substantial nature of the mind, and the reflection is the aham vritti, okay, which is going to try. So now it says that it's this mind cannot have its own mind, yes, because it's made out of matter and its substantial nature. It has borrowed sentience from the only source of sentience. The mind has got 2 portions. For the sake of analysis, the author divides the mind in 2 portions, and that goes into what I'm pointing or directing this conversation now. And we will have to leave it for next week because we are over the time here, and Sylvia is already making noise with the pots on the stove there. Okay, it's lunchtime here. Karen, good to have you back. Much appreciated. And good that Lynn showed up. I was afraid that Lynn has transferred herself to Karen. Karen was going to be Lynn's representative today, but no, both of you showed up. Okay, dokie. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purna Purnamudachyate Purna Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, my friends. We meet again next Monday with Pancha Drsya, okay? For those of you showing up to the party, Pancha Drsya party. Namaste. Thank you.
Namaste.
Ciao.
Okay,
Ciao.
thanks, Arlinda. Bye
Ciao.
now.
Thank you. Thank you all.